The man in front of her spoke in a gravelly whisper. "Don't talk. Just listen." Officer Rachel Toss paused. She had only just climbed out of her patrol car when the ragged figure leaning against the wet brick caught her eye. At a glance, he looked like so many others who lived on the streets. Filthy clothes, an unkempt beard, long hair plastered by the drizzle. Yet his gaze was sharp and urgent. A lean dog stayed close to him, growling as it watched the alley's shadowed mouth. Rachel's training told her to be cautious. Her hand hovered near her holster, instincts humming. There was something about the man's tone that made her slow down. He didn't appear disoriented or drunk. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen a lot. "Behind you," he said again, and pointed toward the alley. She glanced over her shoulder. Trash cans glistened. Water ran in rivulets from the roofs. Nothing else was obvious. And yet the dog's low growl tightened like a warning. Rachel pressed her back to the patrol car, flashlight in hand, every sense keyed to the dark. A faint sound, quick, shuffling shoes, cut through the drizzle. The man's dog barked once, low and sharp. Rachel swung her light toward the alley. The beam cut a silver path through the rain. A figure bolted out of the shadows. The stranger lunged, a flash of metal in his hand. Rachel reacted, her gun came up. Before she could fire, the homeless man's voice barked. "Don't shoot, he's got a knife." Time seemed to slow. The attacker closed the distance, knife raised. Rachel dodged, footing slipping on the slick pavement. The dog lunged, teeth bared. Without hesitation, the ragged man threw himself at the attacker, knocking them both down into the puddles. Rachel froze for a beat, gun raised, torn between stopping the threat and avoiding harm to the man who'd intervened. The dog snapped and snarled, buying a crucial second. Rain turned the scuffle into a blur of wet movement and frantic sound. Rachel fired a single warning shot into the air. The crack of the round split the night. The attacker flinched, giving the man enough leverage to wrench the knife away and fling it aside. The blade skittered and came to rest near Rachel's boot. She kicked it away. With steady hands she moved in, cuffed the attacker, and the fight ended with metal clicking shut and heavy breaths in the rain. When the dust settled, Rachel looked at the man who'd risked his life for her. He sat soaked and heaving, hair plastered to his forehead, and the dog, Max, curled at his side. For the first time since arriving on scene, she felt the full weight of what had happened. She had been saved not by backup or procedure, but by someone the world often ignores. "Are you okay?" she heard herself ask, the question softer than the storm. The man shrugged, wiping rain and grime from his face. "So could you?" he answered simply. There was no braggadocio in it, just a plain truth. Rachel offered the obvious next step. "Do you need a hospital?" He shook his head fast and sharp. Something in his eyes, fear, perhaps shame, shut the door on that option. She hesitated, then fetched a blanket from her car and wrapped it around his shoulders. He accepted it without fuss. She also left him some packaged food she kept for long shifts. The dog nudged his hand and wagged, small signs of normalcy amid the chaos. As she watched him slip back into the shadows, she felt an ache of guilt for how she'd first judged him. She had assumed, as most people did, that his disheveled appearance meant danger or worthlessness. But tonight he'd stepped in and changed everything for her. Back at the station, Rachel filed the report and tried to sleep, but the image of him and his dog kept returning. She found herself circling the neighborhoods. He might haunt alleys, shelter doorways, underpasses. People had heard of the guy with the dog, they said, but few could offer specifics. He remained, frustratingly, a ghost to everyone who tried to find him. Weeks later, On an otherwise quiet patrol, she spotted a familiar shape against a crumbling wall. The dog's ears pricked at the sound of her engine. Rachel pulled over and approached slowly. The man looked up, surprised but calm. "Thought you'd forgotten," he rasped. "Not a chance," Rachel answered, then handed him a fresh sandwich and a bottle of water. He accepted them carefully, as though accepting favors made him vulnerable. They sat on the curb for a while. Finally, she asked the question that had nagged at her. "Why did you do it?" He didn't answer right away. He stroked Max's ears and watched the rain ripple on the pavement. After a long silence, he said, "Because no one else would. Because you didn't look at me like I was nothing." The line hit her in a way reports never could. Rachel realized how often people with worn faces and torn clothes were dismissed. For him, being seen had been enough reason to step into danger. Over the next weeks, she kept finding reasons to check in: food, blankets, conversation. He was guarded about his past, but fragments slipped free. He'd had work once, an apartment, a life that fell apart after a medical emergency and bills and loss. Max had been his one constant. Rachel began to see the man as David, not just a figure in a hood. His intelligence surprised her. He spoke languages with ease, quoted bits of literature, and carried an old, dry humor. He knew the city in ways she didn't. She told him plainly, "You're wasted out here," and he only smiled, bitter. "The world doesn't want men like me anymore," he said. Rachel disagreed, silently determined to prove him wrong. When a storm hammered the city, and she found David sheltering beneath a bridge, she insisted he come with her to the station for the night. He resisted until Max nudged his hand, then allowed himself to be led inside. The precinct's fluorescent lights were harsh. Officers whispered. Some wore skepticism on their faces. Rachel stood beside him anyway, reminding everyone that he had saved her life. That quiet defense changed the tone in the room. For one night he slept on a cot, for once remembering warmth. It felt odd to him, strange to be treated with ordinary human decency. But it mattered. Afterward he admitted how odd it had felt, to not belong and yet feel human. And Rachel promised she would keep showing up. Their small ritual of check-ins grew into something more like friendship. Rachel left little notes in places she knew he'd see them, reminders, kind words. David tucked them into his jacket like precious things. Max warmed to Rachel quickly, greeting her with an enthusiastic, muddy tale. In the chaos of her shifts, David became a quiet anchor. He gave her the calm she didn't know she needed. But the city's cruelty resurfaced. One night, gang members cornered David near an abandoned warehouse, mocking him and trying to take Max. Rachel arrived and shouted the situation into order. Backup arrived and the gang dispersed, leaving bruises on David's face but keeping Max safe. Rachel patched him up, using the first aid kit from her car. He protested, saying he didn't owe her anything. She said, "You saved me once. Now it's my turn." He let her help, for the first time allowing someone in. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Responding to a desperate call about a missing child, Rachel and the team were searching a park when David appeared with Max at his heels. He pointed them to a locked shed. Rachel didn't hesitate. They forced the door and found the frightened little boy inside. The boy was shaken but alive. David walked away almost before anyone could thank him, like being seen made him uncomfortable. But Rachel called after him, "People need you, everyone." Her words landed heavier than any rainstorm. At the station the next day, she laid out the story to her captain. The night David saved her, the child in the shed, the small brave things she'd witnessed. Her persistence wore the captain down. He agreed to meet David, Under the harsh lights of the office, David looked out of place and vulnerable, Max at his side. Rachel introduced him not as a vagrant, but as a person who mattered. The captain offered him part-time work as a translator to help immigrant families who needed someone who spoke their language. David hesitated, suspicious of any kind of handout, but Rachel convinced him it wasn't charity. It's purpose, she said. He accepted slowly. His first days were rough, whispers from coworkers and uneasy looks. Yet in one small interaction, helping a frightened family find their words, everything shifted. People who had doubted him began to recognize his talent and calm. From being invisible, he started to be seen. As months went by, David found steady hours and a new rhythm. Max became a familiar presence at the station, unofficial mascot. David's role expanded beyond translation. His instincts, intuition, and life experience helped officers communicate with the city's unseen communities. Rachel watched the change with quiet pride. What had once been survival grew into something like living. As their partnership deepened, Rachel realized she felt for him more than friendship. She feared what that might mean, but she also couldn't deny the warmth she felt when he was nearby. He, too, was pulled toward something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Trouble still came. There were nights David disappeared, overwhelmed by old memories or shame, and Rachel would find him and coax him back. Each time, she reminded him he wasn't alone. Slowly, his confidence grew. He began to imagine, for the first time in a long time, a future. Word of David's heroics spread beyond the precinct. Newspapers called him an unlikely savior. The man who pulled the child from the shed. The one who'd stopped a knife from becoming tragedy. Cameras made him nervous. Attention felt foreign. When the captain asked him to speak at a community meeting, David nearly backed out. Rachel squeezed his hand and told him to tell the truth. Standing in front of the crowd, he spoke haltingly at first, of hardship, of being overlooked. Then he turned his attention outward. "I was given a second chance," he said. "Don't look at me. Look at the people you pass every day. They matter too." The applause that followed felt enormous. What mattered most to Rachel was not the recognition he received, but how he spoke for others. A voice for the people who remained invisible. Their bond became public in small, human ways. They shared meals. David brought flowers he'd bought with his first paycheck. He laughed at himself for feeling nervous when handing them to her. They talked late into the night over simple dinners. Between laughter and pauses, something tender grew. David wrestled with doubts, old scars that made him wonder what she could possibly see in him. But Rachel didn't try to erase his past. She wanted to walk with him through it. Together, they formed an odd but steady trio, Rachel in uniform, David in clean work boots, Max trotting ahead. They unofficially patrolled neighborhoods sometimes, helping where they could. Children tugged at David's sleeve and petted Max. Neighbors offered small kindnesses. For David, gestures like warm meals and knowing smiles felt like treasures. Months later, the captain called Rachel into his office. "You've changed since he came into your life," he said. She braced for criticism, but he smiled instead. "For the better, you fight harder, you care deeper. Maybe we needed someone like David to remind us why we wear the badge." Rachel left with tears she didn't try to hide. Recognition came in an official ceremony where David was honored for bravery. He was uneasy on stage, but Rachel stood beside him. When asked to speak, he didn't craft a tale of heroics. Instead, he spoke of being given a chance and urged people to notice those they ignored every day. The applause rolled in, but David's words did more than win approval. They shifted perspectives. After the ceremony, Rachel and David walked home beneath the city lights. She slipped her hand into his and he stiffened, then relaxed as warmth moved through him. For so long he had been cold inside and out. Now something had changed. David accepted a modest apartment months later. The place was simple and quiet, bare walls at first, but everything about it felt like a palace to him. Max had his own little corner with a bed and toys, all courtesy of Rachel. One evening as they unpacked boxes, David stopped and said, "You saved me." Rachel put a hand on his cheek and shook her head. "No," she said. "You saved yourself. I only reminded you who you are." They built a life slowly, day by day. The city remained the same in many ways. Crime and poverty and rough edges didn't disappear. But David faced them with a different stance. He no longer merely survived, he belonged. The trio kept moving through the city, helping, listening, showing up. People noticed the change. Children called David by name. Older neighbors offered food. The station used his skills in ways no training could teach. His presence mattered in practical ways, and in quieter ones, he reminded those around him of the dignity in every life. Years after that rainy night, David stood before a crowd again. This time he wasn't just an odd figure with a dog. He was a voice, a bridge. He told the audience about the cost of being unseen and the simple power of being noticed. He urged them not to look away. When he finished, Rachel squeezed his hand. Their lives had changed because someone chose to act, and because someone chose to keep believing. At night, as they walked home under the city's tired glow, Max padding along between them, David would sometimes ask Rachel if she thought he'd really changed. She would smile and answer, the only honest thing she could, "Yes, you showed up. You kept showing up." And that, more than medals or headlines, was the real transformation.